I want to take you back 10 years. 2009, Facebook had 350 million active users. Instagram was not even created yet. It didn't come around until 2010. Today, Instagram has about 1 billion active users. Facebook, 2.5 billion active users. By all best guesses, nearly half of the world is on some kind of social media platform. So my guess is most of us in this room are also on at least one social media platform. And not only are we on these platforms, we are spending time on these platforms. 2.5 hours per day per user was the research for 2019. By the end of our lifetime, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is predicting that this generation of users will have spent 7 years of their life on social media. That's more than house cleaning, shopping, in-person socialization combined. So if we're spending all of this time on social media, then it must be good for us, right? We must have these wonderful side effects of spending time on these online platforms. Well, as you know, and as we've heard earlier, the effects of social media aren't all that positive. Recent studies indicate that 50% of social media users would say that they feel amused or entertained after interacting on social media. Other people indicate they feel envious, depressed, isolated, lonely, dissatisfied with life. Last year, the University of Pennsylvania did a study that directly correlated the more time we're spending on social media, the higher the likelihood of negative effects on our physical health, on our mental health, and on our general life satisfaction. Whew. So if we're spending all of this time on social media, but yet the effects are directly negative by the amount of time that we spend, why in the world are we on there to begin with? And so today I'm not going to convince you to get off of social media. In fact, I think social media is great. I think we're using it the wrong way. I think we're logging in with a mentality that's one where we just go and waste time. Today I want to give you an aha moment so that the next time you log in to whatever social platform it is you participate on, you might see it through a new lens. The lens I want you to see it through is through that of an influencer. Okay, let's get it out of the way. What just went through your head? Did you have visions of Fire Festival and boats going to islands that don't exist? Or are you thinking of the many women or fashion influencers who are showing you what they're wearing in front of a mirror, Visco girls, whatever the trend is right now? Or maybe you thought of that one person who continually pops to the top of your feed trying to sell you a product you don't want and you don't need. Yes, that's what our culture tells us is an influencer. But that's not what an influencer is. And when I worked in marketing a few years ago, people would actually argue about the definition of influencer. Yes, this would be something that went on in the industry where you had to have a certain number of followers or a certain number of impressions. Of course, no one could agree on this definition. But I have a friend, Merriam-Webster. And I decided to go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary to find the definition of influence. Because after all, I am an attorney, and we need to start with the basics, something we all agree on. Influence. The definition of influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, behavior, development of someone or something. Okay, so when we look at this definition, the capacity to have an effect, there's no qualifier for that capacity. You don't have to be a certain age, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. You don't have to belong to a certain political party or a certain religious group or have a degree from a specific school. You most certainly don't have to have a certain amount of income or followers or impressions or reach or whatever else we can agree on. So therefore, if influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, the behavior, the development of those around us, and it's not qualified, we must all have this capacity. Therefore, we're all influencers. just looking at the definition. This didn't really hit home for me until many years later after I did this research and agreed that I was satisfied with my own definition of influence. In March of 2018, I was diagnosed with stage 3 invasive ductal carcinoma that was HER2 positive. That's an aggressive form of breast cancer. I was 34 years old. I had 2 kids, my youngest getting ready to turn 1, my husband Carl and I getting ready to celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary. It literally came out of nowhere. I was diagnosed within 3 days of finding my tumor. But here's what I knew. I did not want to go through a cancer journey alone. So the best way for me to bring people along and for me to control my story was to share it on Instagram. So that's what I did. I talked about my 6 rounds of chemotherapy. I showed people what it was like to go through recovery for a bilateral double mastectomy. And then every day during my 28 rounds of radiation, I would show people pictures of my skin and bless the people who stayed with me today, 28, because it was not a pretty picture. But I let people into my journey. I showed them what it was like. And I had women who along the way would pop into my inbox and say, "Thank you for talking about this. I'm going through cancer as well." And I thought I was the only one who was facing this at my age. I had another woman who found me via a tag on Instagram, and it turned out that we were actually being treated in the same hospital system. Now we're friends. Another woman reached out to tell me that my Instagram profile had inspired her to start sharing her own cancer journey on Instagram, and she created an account just to share her cancer journey. So while I was reaching a group of people, she was reaching an entirely new audience and encouraging hundreds of other people at the same time. This year, in June 2019, I had another woman who popped into my inbox. And she said, "Hey, I heard your story. I see what you've been through, and it encouraged me to go get this situation checked out on my chest." In less than 2 weeks, she was diagnosed with nearly an identical form of breast cancer to me. And while I won't go so far as to say that I saved her life, because I don't believe I did, I made the choice to share my story, and that gave her a new idea about her certain circumstances. It gave her the bravery and the courage to go ask a question she may not have asked otherwise. And after hearing these stories continue to pop into my inbox, women talking to me both online and in person about their situations, that's when I had my aha moment. I was choosing to share my story online by acknowledging my reality. I was giving people an honest look at what it's like to be a young professional and go through treatment for breast cancer. I was doing it in a way that was humble. I wasn't better than anybody else. I wasn't doing it better than anybody else. In fact, it was very messy at times. But then I was also accepting the realities of other people that I started interacting with. I was accepting them by the way I commented on their profiles, by the way I talked to them through our in-person or online dialogues, accepting their realities by the way I chose to like or do something else, some other kind of action on their profile. I acknowledged my situation with humility and accepted others in the process. It was my aha moment. So what does this mean for you? What could this look like? Because this is not about cancer. No. Although 1.8 million people will be diagnosed with cancer in the US this year, we also have 24 million people living with autoimmune diseases, 30 million people living with diabetes, and 1.5 million who will be diagnosed with diabetes next year. We have 1 in 4 couples facing infertility, 1 in 4 pregnancies ending in miscarriages, and 50% of our marriages in the United States are ending in divorce. Collectively, we are going through a lot. So what would it look like for you to turn into the influencer that you are? For you to share your aha moments, allowing people to see your reality and allowing them to know that you accept whatever their reality is. Can you imagine if we got online every day with the lens of an influencer, sharing our aha moments, what would that 2.5 hours of time look like for you? What would that 2.5 hours of time look like for someone else? What would it look like for the person who's spending at least 10% of their day to log on, feeling lonely when they log in, but coming to a place where they find community and acceptance and encouragement? What if 10% of their day became the most uplifting part of their day because they signed online? What if, by sharing your own reality, by sharing your story, you change someone's life simply because you chose to have a positive effect on their character, their development, their behavior? How then might the world look different? Thank you.